Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today on this overview of CII's data warehouse. This very rapid-paced 1-hour session is going to give you all you need to know in order to access the data warehouse. And so it's our training session. You will, of course, be able to reach out to me and get more information later. I know this is going to be kind of a fast-paced course here. So I'm happy to talk to you afterwards and set up some time to go over any questions you have in more detail. As with any meeting, we always remind everybody of the meeting guidelines. Of course, this all applies as well here. So our agenda today is pretty simple. We, of course, we're opening the meeting now. We'll have a quick moment, and then we'll spend some time going through the data warehouse training at a fairly high level, just to hit all the essential elements there. At the end of the session, we will wrap up and have some time for some questions and answers. And of course, you may know about the 2 project per member challenge that we announced at the Board of Advisor meeting. And so hopefully you all can participate and support your data warehouse, and we'll show you how that turns into value for you and value for your membership at large. Feel free to ask questions. You can put them in the chat or ask me as I'm going along here. Otherwise, just ask that if you're not talking, if you keep your mute button going so that there's no outside noise there. Okay, so starting with the safety moment, I thought I would just give you all some grilling tips. It's that time of year. Of course, I live in Texas and I grill all year long, but it's always good to keep in mind some safety in that, because it can lead to some serious injuries there. So of course, these are very practical, but it's kind of relevant for me lately because my daughter is 19, and actually she's had some interest in starting to grill outside. And so we went through some safety tips with her to make sure that she's doing that safely. So of course, grills outside, keep it away from your home. You don't want to catch your home on fire. It needs to be in a flat surface so that it doesn't tip over. If you're using a gas grill, always check for leaks. You can sometimes hear it hissing or you can smell it, but it's important to make sure that it's in good working order. And if it's not, that you repair it immediately and not use it. Keep it clean. You don't want to have some flare-ups from the residue of previous, grease on the grill. Never leave it unattended. Things can happen very quickly. Things can get very bad. Keep your clothing appropriate so that you don't have any of your clothes getting into the way of the fire. Certainly could cause some serious injury there. An important one that actually I need to remind myself on is to keep a spray bottle on hand in case anything does flare up. And then of course, if things get serious, you need to have a fire extinguisher nearby. So these are all very practical, but it's always good to keep these in mind. Okay, so getting started with the data warehouse. So thank you all so much for coming. I'm Deborah DeGazelle. I'm the Manager of Information Services here at CII. I lead the data warehouse effort, and since it's funding by the Board of Advisors back in fall of 2019, where it was approved to relaunch, and then it's the launch of the actual data warehouse last August at the CII annual conference. So I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm so happy that you're all here joining me and trying to find out more about the data warehouse. So any questions at all, just reach out to me. My email is there below. So what are you going to learn today? Well, we're going to show you how you can use data to improve your projects. You'll find out how to submit data to the data warehouse. We'll touch very briefly on the kinds of projects that are in the data warehouse, a little bit about how the data are normalized, how you can assess your project performance, and at some level, what are the metrics available. So within an hour, we don't have time to go too deeply into any one of those topics, but please reach out if you want some follow-up. This is always a good one to start with, because I think it really kind of brings home why project assessment and data analytics are important. Because, you know, how do you know that your projects are performing well objectively? You know, how do you know whether your facilities are, you know, whether you're paying too much for your facilities? How can you compare a project X versus project Y and see, you know, what are the strengths within your project control systems? What are some weaknesses? What are some opportunities for improvement? Maybe how can certain CII best practices help you improve? Will this project succeed? Things like that. So there's a variety of things that we can answer within the CII project assessment world. What we're going to be talking to you today is largely around project controls kind of metrics on cost and schedule, safety changes, rework, those kinds of things. But we actually do have some sector-based programs that go deeper into topics like cost per square foot and things like that. So we're going to keep it really at the high level today, but reach out to us to find out more about some of the more sector specific metrics that gets into the absolute metrics of those cost metrics and things like that. For those of you who are on the Board of Advisors, you would have seen this slide about 2 weeks ago. We issued the call to action for members to each submit 2 projects per company by the annual conference. Well, that's only 3 months away, and we certainly understand that, but the deadlines drive action. And so we hope that you can help us and submit some data to CII. However, if you submit projects in September, I'm not going to turn them down either. So we're pretty much in an ongoing project data collection, but it's really important for us that we reinvigorate the data warehouse with new, fresh data. CII has been doing analytics for 25 years at this point, and we have a lot of data, but we need some new data because the state of the art is always changing, and also getting your projects assessed and compared against the CII database provides benefit to you as well. So you'll get a project performance assessment key report for every single project that you submit. And then of course, this data will support upcoming analysis, which we plan to release some new reports throughout over the next year or so. So that's the call to action, and imagine what we can do with all this new data coming in. So I want to start off with some fundamentals. CII project performance assessment analytics goals. These were fundamentally written about 25 years ago, and it really hasn't changed because some of these facts are kind of timeless. You know, so what are we trying to accomplish here within the data warehouse? Well, we're trying to give you an efficient, cost-effective system so you can benchmark your projects and see how they compare against your competitors and other similar projects in the industry. We want to give you quantitative information on the impact of CII best practices as well. So there's a practical project assessment service that we do, but we also support the overall research objectives of the Institute as well. And part of this data collection is going to give us an opportunity to looking at the impact of best practices in today's environment. Additionally, we do industry specific metrics through our sector programs, and there's a lot of interest to expand that as well. And those of you who participate on sectors will certainly be hearing more about that.
Mike, do you have your hand raised up? Mike Davison?
Yeah, I was just gonna add, thank you for the benefit of those that were not at the Board of Advisors. When we put out the challenge to submit 2 projects by August, we just wanted to maybe explain, and maybe Debbie, you could explain, like, just how much time does that generally take to submit a project, as we did at the BOA. And also I was able to look at, and when we gave that presentation at the BOA, I was able to look at some project information that was submitted and the performance report that you get back in return. And it's pretty impactful. Like, you can compare your project against, in some cases, 300 or 400 other projects that are similar to the one you submit. So right away, you just by submitting one project, even, you can get some very valuable data back that will allow you to then trend your project. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. That's a good point. And so to address your question there, the time to submit a project, what we're asking within this survey using what we call the integration toolkit, if you have a project manager of a project who's submitting data to CII, that information that we are asking for is going to be very much at their fingertips. What we're looking at is phase costs for, the cost for phases, schedule dates by phase, some basic changes and rework and safety, and a few practical practice use questions. And I'll go over a little bit of looking at the minimum data points there, but truly, if you're in the middle of a project or, well, just closing out a project, then all that data should be within your fingertips. And I think it's no more than a 2-hour exercise at the most, which, is definitely a burden and an ask, but we ask that you do that for us. It's so valuable. And the key report that you get back, the more data you provide, of course, the more metrics that we can calculate, the deeper comparison that you'll be able to have. So if you just provide the minimum, you're going to get, a handful of metric comparisons against similar projects. But if you provide more data within that toolkit, we'll be able to provide more metrics, and you'll have more insights into how the project is performing overall. So yeah, thank you. Great question. So just kind of going into, what does CII's data warehouse provide? It's information that's not readily available elsewhere. And, I say that with full awareness that there are other third-party benchmarking systems out there. But CII has some key differences. It's a transparent system. It's based upon CII research. So it does have its unique place and its unique offerings. It gives you a source of analysis to drive your improvement. That's fundamentally why benchmarking is a best practice and why you would want to do this, because you want to know, you need to know how you're performing both internally and externally. This system with the data warehouse is designed to incorporate multiple data sources. There's a reason why we call it the integration toolkit. We're not going to get too much into that today, but it's meant to make it easy for data collection for you. And we're also in the process of incorporating other data sources as well, so that it's a great, rich breadth and depth of analysis that's available. So there's a lot of value there that we can provide to you. Want to point out, your data is always confidential. You are the only one who is going to see your raw data other than the CII research staff. When we use your data for analysis, it is blinded and protected for confidentiality. So there are multiple ways to participate, and we'll touch on that real briefly. This is a slide that we've used for actually since the annual conference, and I like to bring it back because it kind of frames where we're at in current CII data warehouse. So we have a 25-year history of building metrics based upon CII research and developing sector-specific measures. We've got definitions for engineering and construction productivity, practices and things like that. And so that's there's a lot of institutional knowledge on how to run a metrics and analytics program. We took all that knowledge and released the data warehouse. And that's the idea behind that, is that it's using modern techniques and modern platforms so that we can kind of take it to the next level of data analytics. It's an enormously scalable, resilient, and robust environment. And I'll touch on that a little bit more when we talk about where it lives at the Texas Advanced Computing Center. But what I want to really touch on for just a second is where we're going next as well, because the idea is that we're trying to reposition the data warehouse from looking in the past. Of course, benchmarking is known to sort of be looking in the rearview mirror. How did you perform in the past? But the vision for the data warehouse is to be able to predict future performance. And so part of the reason why we're asking for your data today is that so we actually have good, fresh data to start building these models. We are in the early stages of building a machine learning model that actually does actually work in predictive analytics. Because that's what we want to do, is while you're in the midst of the project, be able to give you some assessment. Is it going to succeed, and what are some possible corrective actions that you might be able to take? So this is kind of the last of the vision slides, and then we get back into the bread and butter of the training of the subject today. But imagine what the data warehouse can do for you a couple years in the future, where you can provide your data and truly get a CII perspective on what is the optimal schedule? How much should the project cost? Which is some of the things that we can actually do now on the cost. How do my projects perform? Are there areas of inefficiency? Is it going to be a success? So there's And what we're doing there is we're using a combination of traditional statistical methods, which you're all very familiar with, but also applying machine learning techniques to try to find the answers to these questions so that we have an intelligent system that, that still is based upon real data science. How do we accomplish this? Much of it is due to CII's partnership with the Texas Advanced Computing Center. This is hosted right here at the University of Texas. It's another department here at UT. TICC is consistently in the top 5 of the academic supercomputing environment. It's an incredibly competitive environment, so sometimes they're second, sometimes they're third. You know, it just depends on how who's released the biggest and the bestest supercomputer at the moment. But what's really important to us is that it offers a science as a service. So what is incredibly unique about the TAC offering is that it has they have offered a platform that allows those of us who are in the, you know, built environment, construction execution, you know, we're not experts in high performance computing. We're not experts in machine learning necessarily, but we can utilize those resources that are available at TACC. So not only do they have the high performance computers, but they also have 200 some staff in a variety of different disciplines so that they can help bring the science of big data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence to the subject of, in our case, construction, execution, planning, and things like that. Another very important point is that it is a secure, non-biased university-based system. So your data is never going to be sold. UT is never going to be sold. So you can be confident that your data is secure. The TAC actually receives multiple grants from the NSF, and so it's actually a highly secured facility. So you can feel confident providing your data to us. Okay, so just to get really into the meat and potatoes of the training here today, what we're going to be focusing on is the CII General Project Analytics Lab, which is available to all of you as CII members. It offers you cost and schedule performance comparisons, and that's largely what we're asking for in this data request. It does give you comparisons on safety, changes, rework, engineering and construction productivity, and practices. So again, at this point, we're asking you just for those, primarily for the high level cost and schedule kinds of things, but we actually have quite a bit more available. There's an easy to use integration toolkit. You can simply fill it out. It's actually an Excel-based tool. But what we would like to invite you to do is to make this part of your benchmarking process overall. And there's ways that we can work with you to get kind of increased automation. And we've actually had a few members who've already basically mapped their project data to our CII definitions. So truly all they need to do is when a project is ready to be submitted to CII, they can kind of click a button and then the data is exported and it's ready to go into the data warehouse. And so that burden of data collection gets easier over time because it's kind of baked into the system, as it were. And so it's one of the things that we can do with this new system is make it really try to focus on reducing the friction points of what makes benchmarking hard traditionally and try to make that easier for you. Okay, so we're not going to focus on it too much today, but I do periodically talk to the other CII sectors. And I just wanted to let you know that the manufacturing and life sciences sector has an active sector-specific benchmarking program, and they are also in the midst of a collection. If you submit 2 to that program, it still counts for 2 for this challenge, but we will take 4. And so those metrics for that program tend to be more on the kinds of things for hard costs for dollar per square foot and looking more deeply at construction management costs, process costs, things like that, so that they can get a much deeper kind of analysis on and to do things more along the lines of supporting estimate validation and you know, what should the facility cost kinds of things, and how does that compare to others in the industry. Related to the facilities and healthcare sector, there's a special research program called FFDARAP. That is actually a program that is for federal and other governmental agencies. It really looks at the unique challenges of you know, of a publicly funded organization, you know, the different approval mechanisms and things like that, and provides, you know, different security requirements and all kinds of other considerations that are just different from the private sector. So, and that group is actually also looking at operational and life cycle metrics. So some of the other sectors are also in discussions. I'll be presenting to UMM in the next couple of weeks as well. We're always interested to work with the sectors because that can really give you a much more detailed assessment.
Deborah, we have a question on the chat from Mike Davidson. He's asking, is there an additional cost to set up a lab for your organization?
So the sector labs, it sort of depends. So the MLS lab, actually, there's no additional cost to participate. In terms of the FFDARAP, there is an additional cost because there's actually a fully funded research program alongside that. But to set up sector benchmarking labs typically doesn't require any extra cost. And furthermore, you know, based upon the way you asked the question there, actually we can set up. So if your organization, for example, wanted to submit 50 projects and do some portfolio analysis, actually we can do that very easily for you. By the way that the system is set up, we can set up sort of your own My Company lab, as it were. So keep that in mind. There's actually a lot of things we can do. It's an incredibly flexible and scalable system. And we're actually really interested to hear all your good ideas. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of frame the history a little bit of the data warehouse and the project assessment system. The program was started in 1997, and you can see the different research efforts that conducted over time. So we've looked at construction productivity, engineering productivity, small projects. You can see where the sector program really started here in about 2005 with pharmaceutical and biotech. There was a healthcare study. Here's the federal facility study. We're also now partnering with RT383 on I2PD validation. That data will be going into the data warehouse. We're looking at external data sources to provide more depth and breadth to the system. And it shows here, you know, what's next, looking at PDRI tools and things like that. So we actually have a way of incorporating your PDRI, construction readiness, risk assessment. All those things can actually be crawled by the computer and ingested into the system. So we've actually come up with some fairly innovative ways of getting data into the system. And that was a topic by this data analytics CBA. And so reach out to me if you have some of those tools to provide as well, because we can use that in the analytics. Just at a very high level, here's a list of the number of projects that we have to date. Hopefully we'll be, if we have this session again in a year, we'll see a few hundred more on top of that. But the data warehouse has about 2,400 projects, and the 1010 system has about 2,500. All of those are available, of course, for our analysis. And actually, we're in the midst, in terms of an IT project, of merging those two systems so that you have kind of the quantitative factors coming from the legacy project assessment that's been developed, and then a lot of the qualitative stuff that comes through from the 1010 assessments that look more into the team dynamics and things like that. So stay tuned. This is lots of good developments coming on there. All right. As you look at the integration toolkit, you'll see that we're asking you to provide planned and actual costs per phase, and then planned and actual schedule by phase. And what's important with an external benchmarking program is that we have a common set of definitions. So this is kind of a high level view of, you know, what are the kind of starting activities and end activities for each of these phases. There's actually, within the integration toolkit, there's a whole definition section. So we won't dwell on that too far because there's plenty of definitions there available for you. In fact, it looks just like this. And so you can see the start and stop activities, typical cost elements, and those kinds of things. So if you're wondering, okay, well, does my equipment belong in the procurement phase, or does it belong in the construction phase? Well, there's a handy reference guide for you here. So there's information for each phase. And of course, we're happy to talk to you further if you have some more detailed questions. Okay. We're going to take a quick breeze through some of CII's metrics. There's literally hundreds of metrics that we have defined, and it's easy enough for us to define more. But just looking at some of your typical metrics that we are that if you give us the phase costs, we'll be able to calculate for you. So cost growth. And then of course, for contractors, we have the project budget factor that does account for approved changes. On the schedule side of things, very similar. Where we're, looking at the schedule growth and of course the schedule factor for the contractors. We can do overall growth metrics for the project overall, but then of course we have phase metrics as well that just looks at the performance by individual phase. Of course, CII's hallmark is safety, and so we do collect on a project basis the recordable incident rate and days away. Actually, we ask you for the incidents, and then we calculate the rate and the DART based upon that. And we're also asking you to provide us some information on the cost of changes so that we can calculate the change cost factor and also the impact of rework on the construction phase. So these are very high level and fully aware of that. But what we wanted to do is kind of balance the ask. We don't want to ask every member to spend 6 hours, although if you want to get a detailed assessment for very detailed metrics, just give me a call. But this particular data request, we're just going to keep pretty high level so that we can do some basic analysis. And when you go into the toolkit, you'll also see that there's some practices and there's several other optional questions there. But what we're really focusing on here in today's training session are the metrics that would be generated from sort of the minimal data submittals. Okay, so what do you get out of all that? Well, when you log in to the data warehouse, one of the things that you're going to see is the data miner. The Cii Data Miner is available for you all to use. And as soon as this training is over, all of you on the call we're going to start getting you onboarded. And by next week, all of you will have access to the system. So we're capturing your names here and getting you set up on the system. So how do we interpret the results? Well, the easiest way to remember it is that lower numbers are better. So you typically want to think that first quartile is better. And in this case, a hard cost per square foot. Low numbers truly are better because that means it's a cheaper facility. But there's other metrics such as like cost growth, where you don't really want to underrun the project because it probably means that there was a lot of padding in, or maybe something else. In some ways it just means that the project was less controlled. So for things like cost growth metrics, you probably want to look more towards trying to hit that median because that's probably better. So you're trying to have a well-controlled project. And so you don't necessarily want to, I've heard people in previous training sessions, well, I want to be first quartile in everything. And you really don't want to be first quartile in everything. What you want to do is think about what's important to me. What do I really want to accomplish? What does my organization want to accomplish? And if you have a really schedule-driven project, then maybe you do want to be first quartile in schedule, but there's probably some trade-offs there, right? So there's probably some cost impacts. So maybe being third quartile in cost is okay to you. So you have to understand what the metrics mean. You have to understand that through the lens of your priorities within your organization. What can we do with that data? Well, there's a lot. And those of you who have been through our member onboarding sessions probably have seen this chart. It's actually one of the things that we want to update. Still think it's fundamentally true, but it's something within data analysis that we should probably keep on regenerating these data on a fairly regular basis. What we're looking at here is the difference in cost performance for owners who use a combination of best practices here. So those who are on the high side of using front-end planning, alignment, and planning for startup really did perform significantly better on average. Similarly, just looking at merely front-end planning for owners, you can definitely see some improved cost performance. So that's a very simple to understand kind of analysis, and these and many other things are some of the things that we want to produce in upcoming reports. Okay, so I mentioned the data miner. And so how does the data miner work? It's simple enough. You log in, you pick a metric, and you can generate a plot. But what's really valuable is if you kind of go through there with some intention in mind, and that's when you can find some interesting insights within the data warehouse there. So I'm actually logged in over here in the data warehouse, and this is the Cii Data Miner. Each benchmarking lab actually has their own. If we were to look at the MLS, you would see more of the cost per square foot kind of absolute metrics, but just looking in the Cii Data Lab here today, you can see there's a variety of metrics defined. What I wanted to spend a moment on is just looking at the change cost factor. So already before we came in here, generated the plot. So this is a summary of all the projects. So about four that provided full change data. So about 1,455 projects there, and you can kind of see where first through fourth quartile are. If you mouse over, you can actually see the breakouts there. And that's interesting, but where you can really truly start to see some value is in things like, okay, so how does that change by project nature, for example? So well, we can look by greenfield, modernization, addition, expansion, things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and pick greenfield, and we'll possibly see, be able to observe some slightly different performance there. When you go from there, you can also, and actually a recent question from a member came where they were actually kind of interested in finding out, well, do small projects perform any differently than large projects, for example, in terms of their change cost performance? And actually you can get some interesting answers here. So indeed the data size does get a little bit smaller, but you can see here that actually there was quite an amount of changes experienced here. So I invite you to next week, once you have your full access to the data warehouse, to spend a little time running through some thought experiments. I know all of you are experienced in the project world, so you can kind of go in there and see if the data confirms your suspicions, or if you're going to find out something new. So I'm going to kind of zip through these, just keeping in mind for time. A common question that we get is, okay, so you've been collecting data for 25 years. Do you have a cost normalization practice? And yes, indeed we do. You know, so how does it work? This is a very high level view, but we start with currency conversion, of course. So if we're not collecting in US dollars, we can, if we get the data submitted in a different currency, we convert the currency first. And the idea is that we're localizing to Chicago as our baseline. So in order to get apples to apples comparison, you have to get the projects to a common time frame, a common currency, and a common location. So it's a 1, 2, 3 process: currency conversion, location adjustment, and then time adjustment. And then that gives the normalized cost data. in the relative metrics of cost growth and schedule growth and things like that, that doesn't make any difference particularly, but when you get into metrics programs like the manufacturing and life sciences does, where we're actually looking at cost per square foot, it makes a big difference. And of course, it's essential to have a robust formalization process. So once the data are normalized, we can generate a key report. And I provided one from MLS so that you can kind of see what a project that provided actually a pretty substantial amount of data. This is actually a test project, but you can see that there's more than 20 metric comparisons provided. There's a whole drill down comparison method that we have that tries to provide the best comparisons. And of course, we can happy to talk to you more about that. Okay.
Deborah, we did have a question from Sean Lee. The question was, what normalization index has been used? For example, IHS-CERA index.
Yeah, so in terms of international projects, we're still using kind of a modified version from Faithful and Gould, and then in the local North American, we're using RS Meets. So how do you access the data warehouse? Well, it's simple enough. We do have to get you set up because it is hosted over at TAC. So we actually set up your name over there. But once your name is set up, actually you just use your CII login. So you're going to go straight to construction-institute.org. You're going to log in just like you always do for the knowledge base and all that other good stuff that you use with CII. And then go to the resources tab and where the data warehouse button is, click that button and it'll pop you over to the TAC environment. It'll ask you to approve the TAPIS authorization that is their Science as a Service platform. You'll click submit and you'll be in, and you'll be immediately able to use our data miner. And as soon as you submit projects, you'll be able to see your key report. So submitting data is really easy. We have this Excel tool. All you need to do is fill it out. And if you just want to simply fill that out for right now, that's fine for your 2 projects, but there are instructions available within there for you to be able to map your data so that it's when you're on your 2nd and 3rd and 4th and 5th project that you're submitting to us, you've gone through a mapping exercise with your system so that you can click that button and get all at least your quantitative data out of the system. And that should take that burden of, an hour or 2 of data collection down to just a few minutes. So basically 1 time through in the manual method, and then it all comes out in a map format, and we have more detailed information of how that happens. So when you're looking at the toolkit, you can see that there's a whole bunch of tabs. Don't let that intimidate you. The gray tabs are informational. So they've got your definitions, they've got your instructions, who to contact, how to do it, all those kinds of things. The green tabs are the required and minimum data. So simply answering questions about what is the project name, what is the location, what project nature, delivery method, and then cost and schedule. And that's truly it in terms of what is required. So it won't take too long. However, we do have several other tabs out there just to kind of whet your interest. in case you want to get a more deeper comparison where we're looking at some more detailed cost breakouts. We've got a few very high level productivity measures there. Complexity, security, project acquisition, and about 10 best practices. So I hope I've convinced you. I hope you're ready to participate. Every single project you submit will give you a project performance assessment key report. We'd like for you to submit 2 projects by this August or as soon as you can. And also keep in mind that this is your data warehouse. We want to continue to really advance the science of data analytics and be able to provide those predictive measures for you in the future. So we're giving you value today, but we have visions to give you even more in the future. Okay, as I've mentioned, let's talk. Please reach out. I will help you in project data submittal, definitions and metrics. If you have projects from the past that you submitted, we can help you in what we call the reclamation. So, some of your companies have 50 or more projects from the past, and we can make them accessible to you so that you can set up that portfolio analysis that we talked about. So feel free to reach out, whatever you want to know. Of course, the data analytics CBA is also a resource to you. Strongly encourage every member to have at least one participant on that CBA. That is the community for performance assessment. It's a space to share lessons learned, success stories, challenges, and all kinds of other things. So please join us. And with that, what kind of questions do we have?
We have a couple from Sean Lee. One of them is, can we submit only actual closed out projects, or do you take forecasted or estimates?
We will take forecasted estimates. We will be checking back with you afterwards, after the project is done to reconfirm. But yes, we will take your in-progress projects, assuming that they're sufficiently done that you've got pretty good certainty around that.
Hey, Deb, Michael DePrell here. If I had a project that I was just forming and I wanted to do some checking again in terms of the way my high-level estimate was coming together with respect to various disciplines and suppliers and types, could I use the data warehouse for that type of questioning?
Yeah, you sure could. Caveat being in certain industries, we don't have all of those industries covered, but that's where we dearly want to continue to set up more sector-based benchmarking programs. And maybe you have that in mind because you are the sector leadership.
I was just thinking of another way for people to get used to using it, not just putting data in, but pulling data out.
Absolutely, yes, and MLS, the manufacturing and life sciences, particularly in the pharma biotech manufacturing, have really gotten a lot of value out of that. So yes, indeed. Any other questions? I cannot let this day go by without being a super nerd in that it is May the 4th. So May the 4th be with you all.
Looks like Mike Davidson has his hand raised again.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, just a thought about that one slide that Deborah showed where it showed the 1010 projects. There was around 2,400 of those and then 2,500 of the data specific, so qualitative, quantitative. I just thought for those that are not familiar with 1010, it's amazing the combination of the data that will be in the data warehouse when all of those 1010 projects are in, because not only will you have the quantitative, all the number stuff that we all like, but the 1010 is it gives you all the human factors of a project, stakeholder alignment, things like that. So just wanted to comment on the value of having both in the database will be huge for all of us.
Good point. Yeah, can't emphasize that enough. There's lots of exciting things coming, and the 1010 can truly provide some great value through that program. Mm-hmm.
Hi, Deborah. It's me, Sean.
Hey, Sean.
Great presentation. Thank you so much. I have a question about the how do you handle the old data and the new data? Given the history of a CI benchmarking, old data might be like a couple of decades old. And in the data miner, if we compare like recently new data with like a couple of decades old data, there might be big differences, particularly technology evolvement and then the inflation and everything. So do you kind of have some window, like compare like 10 years old data only, or user can select like 5 years old data only?
Yeah, that's a good question, Sean, and certainly you know very well the data, having been a graduate in our program. But yeah, as of now, the data miner does not have time windowing. I think that's actually, in fact, next couple weeks from now, when we have our data analytics CBA session, we're actually going to do, what are the refinements we want to put into the data miner? And one of those things is putting that time window in there, because certainly there's issues why you may or may not want to include older data. And I think part of what we also want to start looking at is trend lines as well, so that we can kind of understand how certain metrics change on average over time. So it's kind of everything right now, but that's been of course, a real robust conversation about how do we want to be able to window that and kind of modulate that so that we are making sure that we're getting good comparisons.
Thank you.
Sure. Yep, and yes, the Data Analytics CBA meets on the second Thursday of every month. This month's a little weird. We're going to do it the third Thursday, but just reach out and we'll be happy to invite any of you who want to come and please join. Okay, well, thank you all so much for participating. I really appreciate it, and I hope you found it valuable. And we're looking forward to hearing from you and working with you in your project data analytics. And thank you all, and may the 4th be with you.
Thank you, Deborah. May the 4th be with you.
The first be with you, Deborah.
Take care, everybody.